They live in a different rhythm. Not faster, more exact. The 1% who never waste time don't just move quickly. They move with a precision that feels almost spiritual. Every choice carries weight. Every pause means something. To understand them, you can't look at their schedules. You have to look at their psychology. Time, for them, is not a clock. It's a mirror. It reflects their clarity, their hunger, and their unfinished ghosts. They don't start their day by asking, "What should I do?" They start it by asking, "What deserves my life today?" That single distinction rewires the nervous system. It removes distraction, not through discipline, but through devotion. If this feels familiar, stay with me. Because the truth is, these people weren't born efficient. They were born restless. Somewhere early on, they realized that wasting time meant losing control. And losing control once cost them something deep. Maybe it was a moment of humiliation, a broken trust, or a childhood where they had to grow up too soon. Whatever it was, it taught them, if I'm not ahead, I'm vulnerable. So they built their lives around speed. But beneath that speed is fear, refined into focus. People often mistake their intensity for arrogance. But if you listen closely, it's protection. The 1% move fast, not just to win, but to stay safe from the slow ache of regret. They've learned that idle moments awaken the questions they don't want to face. So they fill time with purpose before time fills them with doubt. You can see it in how they talk. Every sentence has architecture. Every conversation has a goal hidden beneath the surface, to extract meaning, to measure value, to test your clarity. They're not trying to dominate. They're trying to confirm that you can keep up. Because to them, time wasted with someone unclear feels like betrayal. Not of you, of themselves. Their boundaries aren't just about efficiency. They're about emotional preservation. The 1% have learned that indecision is a thief that robs energy before it robs minutes. That's why they rarely second-guess a decision once it's made. To them, doubt is not humility. It's an energy leak. And they know how expensive energy is when your life runs on precision. When you watch them decline invitations, cancel meetings, or walk away mid-project, it looks cold. But psychologically, it's self-regulation. They've internalized that every yes to the unimportant dilutes their identity. To waste time, for them, is to waste self. But here's the deeper pattern. Their efficiency isn't born of ease. It's born of unease. Somewhere in their nervous system lives a quiet terror of being ordinary. Not out of vanity, but from the early experience of feeling invisible. The high performer's obsession with time is often a delayed rebellion against that invisibility. They no longer allow themselves to disappear. They've learned that attention, both giving and receiving it, is currency. The way they manage time is the way they manage love, selectively, strategically, and with unspoken intensity. To be given their time is to be seen as significant. To lose their time is to be quietly erased. They don't chase balance. Balance feels like mediocrity to them. They chase alignment, moments where effort meets inevitability. That's why they speak so much about flow, focus, and mastery. What they're really craving is not more hours. It's a state of timelessness where self and action fuse. They're not trying to save time. They're trying to transcend it. Yet there's a paradox here. The people most obsessed with not wasting time often lose touch with what time is for. Their calendars are full. But sometimes their souls feel delayed. Success becomes a substitute for stillness. They keep climbing because they fear that stopping might reveal emptiness, that maybe their Zoshan was their meaning all along. And still, they can't stop, because in their mind, slowing down equals slipping backward. They've built their identity on momentum. Every minute must prove something. Even rest must be productive. They meditate to optimize. They journal to strategize. Even their healing becomes a form of achievement. But if you listen between their lines, there's fatigue disguised as focus. A quiet longing to be unmeasured. They can't name it, but you can sense it in their pauses, the few they allow themselves. In those rare silences, they meet the part of themselves that's been running for years, asking softly, "If I stop achieving, will I still exist?" The 1% who never waste time aren't just disciplined. They're haunted by what might happen if they ever waste themselves. And that's why they master the art of compression, fitting lifetimes into minutes, squeezing potential from every second. It's beautiful, and it's brutal. Because underneath every great optimization lies a story of once feeling powerless. Still, you can't deny the radiance that efficiency gives them. There's something magnetic about someone who knows exactly what they're doing, exactly why, and exactly how long it will take. Their presence organizes chaos. Their clarity makes others feel safe. It's the emotional gravity of certainty. People follow them, not just for what they achieve, but for how decisively they exist. Yet even as they master time, they often lose the softness of it, the slow moments where connection lives. Relationships start to feel like inefficiency. Vulnerability feels like delay. They forget that intimacy requires wasted time, the gentle, meandering hours where nothing is produced but presence. For them, that kind of time feels unbearable. So they keep moving, faster, sharper, until one day they realize that every hour saved was a memory lost. And still, they can't stop calculating. Because control, once learned as safety, doesn't easily unlearn itself. But there's a quiet shift that happens when they begin to see it, when they start to understand that the purpose of mastering time is not to conquer it, but to free themselves from the fear of losing it. That's when precision turns into peace. That's when efficiency becomes expression instead of armor. And this is where the story begins to turn. Because the rare few who evolve beyond mere achievement start to notice something profound about how time really works. They begin to see that time is not an enemy to be managed. It's a relationship to be understood. And like any relationship, the more you try to control it, the less intimacy you have with it. The ultra-successful eventually discover that what they thought was mastery was really avoidance. They weren't mastering time. They were managing anxiety. There's a subtle but powerful shift that happens when they realize this. The need to optimize every moment softens. They begin to sense that time bends to meaning, that an hour of alignment can stretch further than a day of efficiency. They notice that their best ideas arrive not in hustle, but in stillness. The paradox: the people who once feared slowing down eventually learn that slowness is where speed is born. Psychologically, this is the stage where control begins to dissolve. Control once felt like safety, but now it feels like limitation. They start to feel the tension between productivity and presence, the difference between a full calendar and a fulfilled soul. Many of them reach this realization after a quiet collapse, burnout, betrayal, or the sudden loss of something they assumed they had infinite time for. These moments don't just break their routine, they break their identity. Because if your worth has always been measured by what you produce, what are you when you pause? The pause exposes the emotional scaffolding underneath achievement, the fear of not being enough without evidence. That's when time becomes something else entirely, a mirror of self-worth. They start to see that their relationship with time has always been their relationship with love. How they spend it reveals what they believe they deserve. When you think your value is conditional, you fill every hour proving it. But when you begin to believe you are enough, even unproductive minutes start to feel sacred. The ultra-successful rarely talk about this stage because it threatens the mythology of relentless ambition. But in private, many admit that success without inner stillness feels like speed without direction. They've learned to fill every gap except the one inside. The more they achieve, the more visible the void becomes. So they learn a new kind of mastery, not of time, but of presence. Presence is a skill they once overlooked. It's not about focus, it's about surrender. To be fully present, you have to let go of measurement. You have to allow time to unfold instead of extracting it. This feels unnatural to the 1%, whose entire life has been about extraction, extracting performance, results, outcomes. But once they taste presence, they realize it gives them something optimization never could: peace. This peace doesn't come easy. It's earned through confrontation. The confrontation with everything they avoided by staying busy. They meet the parts of themselves they've outrun, the neglected relationships, the ignored emotions, the creative impulses that didn't fit into the spreadsheet. They begin to see that time wasted isn't time lost. It's time returned. Returned to the parts of the self that were exiled in the name of efficiency. You can see this transformation in their language. The vocabulary of maximize becomes replaced with align. Grind becomes flow. Schedule becomes space. Their sentences stretch. Their metaphors soften. They start to speak from experience instead of from goals. That's the sound of someone who's no longer at war with the clock. They begin to see that time doesn't have to be sliced into productivity units. It can breathe. It can expand. They learn to trust cycles, moments of intense creation followed by moments of stillness. The ultra-successful who evolve emotionally learn to surf time rather than fight it. They understand that waves of energy come and go, that the pause between waves isn't failure, it's preparation. This realization changes how they lead. Their presence shifts from commanding to calibrating. Instead of forcing performance, they cultivate environments where others align naturally. They stop rewarding busyness and start recognizing clarity. Meetings shorten because meaning deepens. People around them begin to move with a quieter confidence, a reflection of their leader's internal rhythm. Psychologically, this is when they step from control mode into trust mode. Trusting time means trusting life. It means believing that not every outcome needs to be forced, that some results emerge organically from authenticity. This is difficult for the 1%, because their nervous systems are wired for anticipation. But slowly, They realize that surrender isn't the absence of control. It's the presence of confidence. They start noticing a hidden truth about time. It mirrors the emotional state you live in. When you're anxious, time accelerates. When you're peaceful, it stretches. The 1% who never waste time used to believe they were saving time. Now they realize they were compressing it. Every second, packed with urgency, made their lives feel shorter. Slowing down doesn't steal time. It expands it. This new awareness changes how they see others. They start recognizing that most people don't waste time out of laziness. They waste it out of fear. Fear of choosing wrong, fear of missing out, fear of confronting what matters most. They realize that clarity, not discipline, is what separates them from the masses. Discipline just maintains motion. Clarity creates direction. But there's another layer, even deeper. They begin to see that their original drive, the one that made them rich, powerful, unstoppable, was never really about achievement. It was about wanting to feel safe in the world. To control time is to control fate, and to control fate is to feel less afraid of loss. But when they begin trusting time, they discover a gentler form of safety, one rooted not in control, but in connection. Their interactions change. They start asking different questions. Not, how can I win faster? But, what's worth winning at all? Not, how can I optimize this hour? But, what feeling do I want this hour to hold? The emotional intelligence of the 1% matures from conquest to coherence. They no longer just manage minutes. They design moments. And yet, the old habits still whisper. The compulsion to check the clock, the anxiety when things move too slowly, the quiet guilt when resting. They all linger, like echoes from a past self. Growth doesn't erase patterns. It teaches you to hold them with awareness. The ultra-successful learn to coexist with their old urgency without obeying it. In those moments, something profound happens. Time stops being external. It becomes internal, a pulse they can feel, guide, and harmonize with. They move through the day, not as managers of time, but as participants in its rhythm. They realize that every hour is a conversation between who they are and who they're becoming. And just when they think they've understood time, they encounter its final mystery. That the more you align with it, the less of it you seem to need. Flow collapses duration. Mastery creates spaciousness. A day can feel like a lifetime when it's lived with full attention. That's when they understand. They were never chasing more time. They were chasing more life inside it. But something even deeper begins to stir beneath that realization. A quieter question they never thought they'd ask. The question is simple, but it rearranges everything they've built. What if time isn't meant to be managed at all, but loved? It arrives quietly, often in the middle of what should have been another ordinary day. The kind of day that used to be itemized into outcomes. Yet suddenly, the minutes feel tender. The ticking clock no longer sounds like pressure. It sounds like presence. The 1% who never waste time begin to feel something new. Gratitude, not for what time gives, but for the fact that it passes at all. Because only through passing does it reveal meaning. They start to realize that the reason they once feared wasting time was because they equated unused with unworthy. If a moment didn't produce something measurable, They believed it didn't matter. But now, standing on the other side of success, they sense the lie beneath that logic. The most meaningful moments of their lives were the ones they never planned. The accidental laughter, the quiet sunrise after a sleepless night of building. The pauses that reminded them they were human, not machinery. This is the emotional awakening of the ultra-successful, when achievement loses its tension and becomes appreciation. They see that the same drive that built their empire was also the same wound that built their distance. They begin to forgive the younger self who equated rest with regression, the one who mistook exhaustion for excellence. They finally see that time never needed to be conquered. It just needed to be accompanied. Their days take on a new rhythm, not slower, but more felt. They still rise early, still plan precisely, but the energy beneath it has changed. It's no longer I must not waste time. It's I want to meet time fully. The distinction is invisible to others, but seismic inside them. When you stop trying to use time and start trying to meet it, you stop living from fear and start living from intimacy. Psychologically, this stage represents integration, the merging of the achiever and the human. They no longer exile the part of themselves that craves softness, connection, and art. They understand that the same mind that strategizes can also savor. The same discipline that built an empire can also build a moment of awe. For perhaps the rarest skill of all is the ability to remain successful and present. You can feel it in their presence. The nervous energy that once filled a room becomes quiet authority. They speak slower, not because they lack conviction, but because they finally trust silence. They look people in the eye without calculating the next task. Their attention, once weaponized, becomes warmth. The power that once came from control now comes from calm. This evolution is not about abandoning ambition. It's about purifying it. They realize ambition without awareness is just anxiety wearing a goal. True ambition, they discover, is not to get more from life, but to give more of yourself to it. It's not about adding hours, but about deepening seconds. There's a hidden psychology here, the transformation from chronos to kairos. Chronos is chronological time, the time of the clock, the domain they once mastered. Kairos is the felt time of significance, moments that transcend measurement. The ultra-successful who awaken to this understand that the richest life is not built on the number of hours lived, but on the number of hours remembered. They begin to measure differently. Instead of ROI, they ask about ROL, return on life. They notice that a 5-minute conversation with genuine connection can shift more in them than a 5-hour meeting filled with metrics. They start investing attention the way they once invested money, strategically, but also with emotion, because they now understand that where attention goes, aliveness follows. There's an almost childlike wonder that returns in this stage. They become fascinated again, not by power, but by presence. They notice the texture of ordinary things, the way steam curls from coffee, the way light lands on a desk. The precision they once used to cut time into tasks now becomes the precision through which they perceive beauty. They start realizing that awareness itself is a form of wealth, and this awareness changes everything about how they use time. They stop multitasking, not because it's inefficient, but because it fragments their being. They stop scheduling every minute, not because they're lazy, but because spontaneity is how the soul breathes. They stop chasing productivity hacks because the real optimization now is emotional coherence, alignment between action and aliveness. In conversations, they listen longer. They no longer rush the other person's words to reach the point. They recognize that the point is the words. In those moments, they experience something they never did before: unearned worth, the ability to be valuable without producing anything. That's the ultimate freedom, when your value no longer depends on output. They realize they were never really afraid of wasting time. They were afraid of facing the parts of themselves that didn't know how to rest. Because rest isn't the opposite of work. It's the repair of self-trust. When you can rest without guilt, it means you finally believe you're enough. Some of them start mentoring differently. Instead of teaching tactics, they teach awareness. Instead of asking, "What are you doing with your time?" they ask, "What is time doing with you?" Because they now understand that time doesn't just pass through our lives, it shapes who we become. How we treat time is how we treat ourselves. They also begin to sense mortality differently, not as a threat, but as a teacher. The inevitability of endings gives every moment its urgency and its tenderness. They understand now why they once raced against time. They feared death as the ultimate inefficiency. But now they see death as the ultimate reminder that presence is the only form of immortality we ever get. And with that realization comes peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from slowing down, but from no longer running away. They don't need to prove worthiness through speed anymore. They can finally allow time to move as it always has, freely, unpredictably, beautifully. Sometimes, when they sit alone, after the deals, the meetings, the accolades, they feel a soft ache. Not regret, but recognition. They realize that the most powerful use of time isn't to build empires or accumulate wealth. It's to deepen consciousness, to wake up inside the very minutes others overlook, to understand that mastery of time is not measured in what you produce, but in how fully you exist while producing it. And in that stillness, they finally meet the truth they were chasing all along. Time doesn't belong to the disciplined. It belongs to the devoted. Because devotion is the only thing that turns minutes into meaning. They sit with that truth quietly. No urgency, no agenda, just awareness. The clock keeps ticking, but now it feels like a heartbeat instead of a countdown. Every second is a pulse of permission, a reminder that the point of managing time was never efficiency. It was intimacy. And perhaps that's the paradox of the 1% who never waste time. In the end, the ones who seem to master it are the ones who finally surrender to it. They no longer chase control. They chase connection. They stop measuring life by the quantity of minutes and start measuring it by the quality of attention. They understand now that time has never been about scarcity. It's been about presence. The real elite are not those who own the most hours, but those who inhabit their hours most completely. And as they live this way, quietly, without needing to announce it, something miraculous happens. Time starts to love them back. It expands for them. It bends toward meaning. It rewards them with moments that feel eternal. They don't talk about this publicly. It doesn't fit into a keynote or a strategy. But if you watch closely, you'll see it in their eyes. A softness that wasn't there before. The look of someone who no longer fears the clock. Someone who finally understands that time was never running out. It was always running through. And maybe that's where we all end up, if we're lucky enough. Standing in the quiet between seconds, realizing that the real wealth was never in what we owned or achieved, but in how deeply we allowed ourselves to live inside each passing moment.